I'm Holly. I'm DTA Wales's Communications and Events Officer. I'll just give you a little bit of an overview about Egin and DTA Wales and then pass you over to Dave from the Severn Wye Energy Agency. And then after he's chatted for about 20 minutes, Matt, the Systems and Engagement Manager for DTA Wales, who's also co-manages the Egin programme. He'll take over and just explain, kind of popping you in some breakout rooms so that you can have kind of more in-depth discussions with each other, I guess, about where you are in your energy journeys. So this webinar is hosted by DTA Wales. It's part of the Egin programme's series of learning and sharing webinars. For those of you who don't know, Egin is a mentoring programme that supports communities in Wales to take their first steps towards tackling climate change and becoming more sustainable. So yeah, look out for more events like this on our social media, on our website. We've got great things happening. I'll pop some kind of handles and links in the chat for you just afterwards. And yeah, if you guys are happy to do so, but no pressure, just pop your name in the chat, introduce yourselves, your name, the community organisation that you're here on behalf of today. And if you want to share it, your email address. I just want to give a little push about our Egin online community. So this is an amazing platform for groups and individuals such as yourselves to discuss ideas, share insights, ask questions about any environmental topics that are important to you, such as content from this webinar today. So yeah, pop your email address in the chat and just tell us that you're happy with us to add you to that. We can invite you to it if you wish to. It's a really easy process. It takes less than 2 minutes. And we'll also be popping the resources from this webinar on there today. Yeah, post-webinar. So yeah, Dave is going to lead us through the essentials of what we need to consider when we're planning energy efficiency measures and renewables in community buildings for about 20 minutes or so. And then the rest of the hour is over to you guys. We'll pop you in breakout rooms and there'll be an opportunity to share and hear from each other's experiences about where you're at in your energy efficiency journeys. And yeah, the idea is that you can kind of share some time and establish some links with each other, with people that are doing something very similar to you guys. So yeah, over to you, Dave. I think you've got sharing rights now, so you should be able to go.
Deall. Right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Gittins, and I'm from Severn Wye Energy Agency, and I will just start my sharing process so we can get that up, and hopefully that will any second now. So Holly, can you give me a thumbs up? You can see that? Excellent. That's great. Thanks very much. So I'm going to briefly talk through a few things today, and that will include a quick background to Severn Wye, thinking about the basics of energy efficiency in community buildings. We'll have a look at some of the case studies we've worked on as part of Egin, and also think about some key points of energy efficiency. So before I start, today I will be talking in generalities about energy efficiency in community buildings, and it's important to note that what I am talking about may not be exactly right for your community building, depending on the age of it, the fabric of that building, the heating source you have, the amount you use that building, or any previous upgrades. So I'll be talking in broad ideas and concepts, and the best thing you can do to understand what to do at your community building is to have an energy audit to get some very specific detail on it. But this will give you some really useful tips and direction of travel of things that you might want to look at. So a quick introduction to Severn Wye. We are a fuel poverty and climate change charity. We work across Wales and the border counties of England. We do two different types of work. We do energy services, supporting people in their own homes around retrofit, advice and energy. We have an innovation team looking at carbon capture and renewable technologies. We also support businesses to look at retrofits, tariff brokering and energy management. And we also work with communities to provide energy advice to people who are in fuel poverty, and work with communities to help them come up with solutions focused around energy, looking at their local challenges. So let's think about energy efficiency and the basics. My first question to everyone is, what is the cheapest unit of energy? I appreciate you're probably all on mute at the moment, but if anyone would like to unmute themselves and throw out an answer, I'd be very grateful. Any ideas?
I think Steph was talking, but you were muted.
Yeah, I was just saying I have no idea to myself.
I've got the gas, Google.
Sorry, Simon, what was that?
I'm going for gas.
Right, okay, I will put the answer up on the screen. The cheapest unit of energy is the one you will never use. So it's a really important point to make. It's about reducing energy, not just having cheap sources of energy. And so it's a bit of a trick question, a bit unfair, but it's a really good one to think about at the start. Is the best thing is to use less energy where you can. And this slide, I think, is a really good concept to think about, and it's the leaky bucket concept. So if our community building is a leaky bucket, and rather than water coming out, it's heat, the best thing we can do is stop that bucket from leaking. What we don't want to do is put more heat into it. So saying, okay, we're going to upgrade the heating system so we can pour even more heat into it, or think about renewable energy right now, because again, whatever you do, the heat will still leak out of it unless you resolved those leaky buckets. So our approach to energy efficiency. Sorry, Steph, you got your hand up.
Yeah, can I just ask, sorry, because your picture is over the word. The approach is called
fabric first.
Fabric first. Okay, thank you. Sorry, yes. I couldn't move you. Sorry.
Yeah. So the approach to fabric first is don't do anything until you've sorted out the fabric of your building. So energy efficiency measures are the best place to spend money to start with. And whilst I realise that insulation isn't a very exciting subject, and most of the time you can't even see it in a building, and solar panels are far more visible, it's really important to get the basics right first. So that fabric first approach is key as we're going through today. So on the left-hand side of your screen, there is the energy hierarchy, and that sets out how you should do things, which you should do, which order you should do them in. So the first of them is minimizing your energy demand. And so that's really simple stuff like turning lights off, stop doing things, turning the heating down, and making sure that your building is not using energy when you're not in the building. Key to that is monitoring your energy use, so you know if something has been left on, or there is a fault or a problem with one of your heating systems. The next thing is around maximizing energy efficiency, and that is making sure that you have the most energy efficient appliances and buildings that you can. So making sure that your building is well insulated, you have an efficient heating system, and when you're replacing appliances such as fridges, computers, whatever that may be, making sure they're as energy efficient as possible. The next step on the energy hierarchy is around utilizing low carbon energy. And so that is generating your own energy on site after you've got an efficient building and efficient appliances in it. And the final thing, if you want to go all the way to net zero, is to then look at offsetting once you've done all those other things, to make allowances for the things you can't change. So I'm hoping for a bit more audience participation now. When we think about the average house, how much heat loss happens through each of the 5 different areas that I've got on the screen there. So if anyone would like to suggest how much goes out via the walls first.
25%.
Thank you, Alan. Any other ideas?
Agree, 35%.
Okay, well, there's some people been doing their homework there. And yes, so it's 35% coming out through the walls, 25% through the roof, 15% through drafts in the building, 15% through the floor, and 10% through the windows. And as I said earlier, that number is an average of houses. And again, if your community building has loads of windows, or a very different structure to that, it may be different, but it's a good general way to look at this, and it helps you steer you to where you would make improvements first. So lots of people always think that windows are the most important thing you can do to upgrade your energy efficiency, when actually, because of the surface area of that building, there's more heat loss through the walls. So looking at insulating your walls effectively will save you more energy and keep that building warm. So we've got a few energy saving tips. First of those is around programming your heating. It's very difficult with community buildings because it's not like you're there all the time and bookings can vary. So it's really important that you have control over your building and make sure that we're not heating it when it doesn't need it. Also setting the temperature appropriately and having control over who can set that temperature as well. We've got some ballpark figures there. If it's people sitting in a hall, 20 degrees. If it's more active stuff, 18 degrees is fine. But thinking about who controls that, so we don't have the community group come in and set the thermostat to 26, and then we're spending an awful lot of money and carbon heating up to that temperature. If you've got a more modern combi boiler, you can turn down the flow temperature on the boiler to make sure that you're not excessively heating that water, and you can rely on the radiators to get the heat out at a slightly lower temperature, and it saves quite a bit of money. Energy efficient light bulbs such as LEDs can save a huge amount of money compared to old incandescent light bulbs, and will pay back for themselves very quickly. So if your hall doesn't have LED lighting throughout, and that includes outside, it's well worth looking at investing in them. And this is an obvious one, but it does get overlooked when community groups have the responsibility of turning off lights and appliances at the end of a session. So thinking about whether you can have remote control on things like heating to make sure that they are returned to that standby temperature, or appliances are left turned off. So thinking broadly around energy saving in community buildings, as I said, they're all different in their user profile, their energy consumption, and sometimes you have many people who go in and look after when the temperature's up, the heating's on, and how that's controlled, and sometimes it's just one person, such as a caretaker. Occupancy controls to the internal lighting and detection controls to external lighting can make a big difference. So lighting isn't left on throughout a night or for several days until someone else comes and uses the building again. We can broadly save about 8% per degree you turn down the temperature, but obviously for some things such as a yoga or floor-based activities, you'd still want it quite warm in there. Always buy the most energy efficient appliances you can afford, and make sure things like freezers are regularly defrosted so you aren't trying to cool a huge block of ice. Bottle chillers in bar areas are a really interesting one, because quite often they're left on all the time, and if we've worked with certainly sports clubs where those bottles are chilled 7 days a week and the premises is only used 3 days a week. So thinking about how putting timers on them so they're cool for when they need to be used, but they're not being cooled the rest of the time. Also thinking about your usage, it's more efficient to have back-to-back bookings, so you're heating the whole lot once and then maintaining it that temperature rather than having an hour's booking each night. And I appreciate that's not always possible, but it's a good thing to do if you can. And as I mentioned earlier, having an app where multiple people can look at the temperature of a building, and if it's not being used, make sure that it's turned off. So one of the biggest things you can do that costs no money is measure your energy consumption. And Peter Drucker, the business management expert, said you can't manage what you don't measure. And absolutely a very good point. If you're not looking at your energy use, there could be leaks, there could be faulty things. You could have had the boiler running unprogrammed, giving you hot water 24/7, and you don't even know that's happening until you get a huge bill. So looking at that energy use on a regular basis is really important. And I've put a little table up there on the screen just to show you how simple it can be, that you take readings every month and then you can monitor how that goes throughout the year. And it's important to measure units rather than the bills or the cost, because prices can change throughout the year, whereas a unit is a unit, so that won't change. And looking at whether there's an increase on last year, so once you've collected the year's data, don't just throw that away, use it so you compare what you've got this year to last year, so you can see, has that energy consumption gone up or gone down. It's also important to note that if you suddenly have lots of bookings for your hall that you didn't have the previous year, it's likely your energy use will go up. But it's so to monitor that as well, how many bookings you had each month. So it allows you to understand why that might be happening, that increase. Using this method is great for spotting faults with heating systems, or leaks, things like that, and putting these into a graph, which you can do in Excel, means it's very easy to understand a trend to see if it's going up or down, or if there's a spike at a certain point of the year. So we'll go through a couple of case studies we've done through Egin, looking at some community buildings. We've picked some ones that are all different, and some of them may look like the community buildings you work with, some may not. So one of these is Haverfordwest Mosque. It was a former council tax office until 2022, and it looks, as you can see from the picture, more like an office accommodation rather than a community building. But it's been taken over, not just as a place of worship, but also as a community centre for the wider area. So there are a number of things going on there, and they approached again on wanting to understand how they can make that building more energy efficient. And we've been able to identify that they could save £3,500 a year on their energy costs, and save 3.5 tons of carbon a year as well, with some investment. So a number of no-cost and low-cost measures around upgrading their appliances and their kitchens to A-rated because they were quite old, and using an induction hob rather than a standard electric hob. As far as the capital measures went, solar PV with battery storage was a good option because they have a very big flat roof area for them, and they were keen to put vehicle charging points in as well. The fabric first approach that I was talking about earlier highlighted the fact that they needed to fit double glazing, look at cavity wall insulation, and putting some insulation in those large flat roofs they've got. And also a lot of the lights were quite old as well, so fitting LED lights, and also recommended a biomass boiler for space heating because it was such a big area. The second study, we've got a lot smaller building and a sports club in Glencorrig. The rugby club there, they wanted to see how they could save significant amounts of energy with the overall ambition of being net zero in the future. And slightly smaller savings on an annual basis, and tons of carbon produced, but because they're a smaller building, I think that was the reason there. But a number of low-cost measures there. So looking at checking whether there was cavity wall insulation in the building, using an energy broker, so finding the cheapest deals out there. So rather than doing that work yourself, using an energy broker to help you identify that. There are a number of those available. Looking at optimizing the boiler temperatures throughout the year to make sure that they're not heating water or the central heating too high. Putting timers on the drinks cabinets in the bar and motion sensors in the toilets and lower use areas. Again, we recommended replacing the lighting with LED alternatives and having smart heating controls so they could be more flexible when they add their heating controls, and putting additional insulation in the roof space. They already had some, but topping that up to say 300 mil to make sure it was the most insulated it could be. And then install a battery and solar system. The final case study we've got is a lot older building in the Cilchmaethrin in Aberdare. It's a lovely old building, but that quite often means they're hard to heat and hard to treat. So some of those low cost recommendations included looking at an energy policy. So this doesn't have to be complicated, but just thinking about when you have points where you're going to upgrade part of the building, you would always look for the most energy efficient way of doing that. When you're replacing appliances, looking at the energy efficiency of those appliances. Recording meter readings to ensure that they had accurate billing and check for faults. Ensuring equipment is switched off when the building isn't in use, as it wasn't used all the time, and making sure the seals on the doors stop drafts. Some of the capital measures recommended were replacing the gas boilers and zoning the building so you could, rather than heating the whole space all the time, you could choose which bits you heated depending on where they were using. And again, coming back to that fabric first, improving the loft insulation and insulating those external rendered walls. And finally, after that was done, including some solar PV. So I'm now going to talk through a few different things to consider when you're thinking about energy efficiency in your community buildings. So reasons to think about energy efficiency is, the first one for many community buildings is the cost, and with the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis that we've experienced over the last few years, saving money is really important to a lot of community buildings and the management committees. Increasing the energy efficiency can often mean that users have a more comfortable hall, and I'm sure many of you have had that had complaints from groups that aren't happy that their users have felt a bit cold at times in the winter months. So as well as keeping those original users, it can also encourage others to come and use your building, and it will hopefully protect you from future energy cost increases. Another great thing is if you've got that wonderfully insulated, warm community building, it's great to demonstrate that to the local community and show that you can also reduce carbon in line with our national carbon targets. So when thinking about using energy, it's good to go, where is that energy going? So as a management committee, think about, well, what do we use energy for? And quite often, but depending on where you live in Wales, whether you have gas will dictate whether you're on gas, oil or LPG, and what that's used for. So is that space heating for the main areas in the hall, or water heating, whether you're using it for cooking? The electricity side could be some places use entirely electricity and electric wall heaters to heat up, have electric water heating, lighting, and then thinking around things like kitchens, refrigeration, bar equipment, and then things like IT, fans, security equipment, but also other things like some areas might need sewage pumps, you may have alarms, CCTV, and try and think about all the things that you could turn off when the building isn't in use. And the last bullet point there is around eliminating base load, and a base load is what's left once you've stopped using the building. So if you've got things running that might only cost a few pence, and an hour to run, but they're running for 365 days a year, that all builds up. So trying to understand if there are any things that do use energy. There's certain electronic items such as washing machines that if they aren't turned off at the wall, they might be using energy, or those lamps you can touch rather than having to use a physical switch. There's lots of things that might just be using a little bit of energy and causing cost and more energy use. So when you are looking at your community building, it's good to think about the first thing is the no cost behavioural changes you can do, and low cost. So that's encouraging people to turn off, not be wasteful. Then think about insulating your building and fabric improvement on your building. Look at your space heating, and for some people that's cooling as well. And improve controls to make sure you can use that as efficiently as you can. LED lighting controls is really important. And then water saving can make a big difference as well. And then once all those things have been done, thinking about renewable technology, and when people have fitted that, a lot of organisations are now thinking about electric vehicle chargers too. So you may not have any money or any plans to retrofit your building at the moment, but looking at trigger points when that can happen. So if for some reason you decide that the kitchens, bathrooms, toilets, the roof needs doing, the heating needs upgrading, use that as a point to think, well, what else could we do to make our building more energy efficient at the same time? And obviously funding is a great trigger point for this. And I'm sure as part of this, the Egin team will be able to point in the direction of some funding where it's available. So thinking about no cost and low cost options, the real one that makes a big difference is recording and monitoring your energy use. So that can really identify where there are problems or where people have left stuff on or using the building incorrectly. It's great to use an energy broker who will find you the best price for your energy, and routinely check that once your contract's up, so you're never out of contract and paying high prices. Make sure the settings on your boiler are correct, and think about who is responsible for making sure that those are done on a regular basis, that people haven't played with them. If you've got cooling, think about the settings in your beer cellars or fridges. Can they be optimized so they're not running all the time, or could they be turned down a bit so they are using less energy? Using timers is a great way of doing that, not just for the drinks, but also if you've got heaters that come on a timer, think about making sure that they're regularly checked so they're still relevant to the time of year. Draft proofing and heavy curtains is a really nice, easy, cheap way of keeping out drafts where you don't need to, where you haven't got the money to upgrade windows and doors at that time. And putting sensors on lights and appliances to make sure they're only on when they need to be. Insulating pipework can also make a big difference, and it's one of those things that people don't do, or it's done and bits fall off. And if you've got a boiler room that feels nice and cozy, it shouldn't be. It should be insulated, and all that heat should be going into your heating system around the building, not into the boiler room. So making sure all that pipework is insulated, including all the corners and the valves, will make a massive difference as well, because the heat's going where it's intended. Looking at the insulation and building fabric, different types of wall insulation, that can be internal wall insulation or external wall insulation, or cavity where you have a cavity. Loft and roof insulation, depending on the type of roof, can be quite cheap to install and makes a massive difference. Looking at the fabric of cooled areas, so if you have a cellar as part, a beer cellar as part of it, or a chilled room, making sure that is up to standard to keep the cooling rather than the heating. And this is a vitally important one. There's no point in insulating your roof if your roof leaks, because wet insulation doesn't work. So making sure your building is in good order before you do energy efficiency works. And that last one around the building fabric is making sure that you have efficient glazing doors, and the draft proofing is good, so they're trapping the heat in and there are no cold drafts coming in. Thinking about space heating, as I said at the start, it all depends on the type of building you have. We do quite a bit of work with churches, and quite often there, it's so difficult to heat a huge building like a church. We wouldn't recommend putting in central heating, and actually infrared heaters that point down on the congregation are much more beneficial in those situations, and people will feel more warmth. So it's good to think about the fuel that's available, the current heating system you have and how efficient it is. What's your building like to heat? Is it old and very drafty? Are there restrictions on the work you can do to improve it? Is it listed, for example? Then thinking about how often your site is used and how regularly, and who is the user and what temperature does it need to be. And are there other improvement works that are being considered, such as photovoltaics and solar and batteries, because those can be linked in to stuff like air source heat pumps. Is carbon reduction the main drive for this, or is it about financial savings? So yeah, lots of things to consider there. Another one around is the controls. So thinking about, is there a single heating system in the building with one zone? So are you heating rooms you don't always use? And if you could zone that, could you heat one of those rooms differently to make it more efficient and cheaper to run? And having remote controls, so the building manager or caretaker can turn the heating on and off without relying on that community group to turn the heating when they're done. TRVs and room thermostats will help to make sure that a room doesn't heat excessively and is kept to that target temperature. And thinking about the hot water, we've been to so many places, sports clubs, where they end up heating hot water that's enough to wash the entire rugby team every day of the week. So thinking around timers to make sure that that's only when matches are happening at the weekend, or electric point of use heating, so an instant shower rather than having a huge hot water tank is another option. Some other ways to save that aren't as obvious. I've already mentioned the timers on the drinks fridges, but destratification fans make a big difference. So if you've got a very tall main hall in your community building, you'll often find that if you get a ladder and go and stand up at the apex of the roof, it's 10 degrees warmer than it is if you're sat on the floor. And a destratification fan is a very cheap way of circulating that air to make sure it all mixes and you get a much nicer, warmer ambient temperature without having the heat all up at the roof. Ambient cooling rather than air conditioning is important, or can be a good way to save money. And those PIR sensors on lighting mean that they're only on when they're needed, and they're great because you don't have to, they can pick people up if you're in a car park and there's no street lighting. Rather than having to walk over and turn the lights on when you're in the building, they can pick you up as you're coming across, and there's a security element to that too. Buying efficient appliances is really key. And there's things like deaerators and system additives that make your wet heating system run more efficiently, that can be added as well at reasonably low costs. I think I should say induction hobs, not just induction, as a more efficient way of heating if you're doing lots of cooking, and thinking about water efficient taps and toilets. So you're not running as much water through every time someone flushes the toilets or the urinals, and taps are not left on for extended periods of time. Another important thing is ventilation and extraction, and quite often you go into a community centre and they have very old extraction facilities that are either so clogged that they won't run anymore, or they're running at less than optimal efficiency. So it's really important where those are present is to make sure they're clean and they can extract that damp and stale air to make sure that you're not getting a build-up of moisture in your building. One of the final things to look at is renewable and low carbon technologies. So that can be air source or ground source heat pump, where you're looking to replace your existing heating systems, and you have you can combine that with solar and batteries. Solar thermal is an option if you have a significant hot water demand, although you can use solar PV. You can divert the energy generated to heat water as well if you have a hot water tank. And that's a more flexible way of working because you can use that energy in lighting or for hot water then. When you're thinking about solar, is it sized for cost or for carbon savings? And make sure you're thinking about other uses of that energy that could happen in the future. So always think about expansion and use, increased use of that community building in the future. So hopefully I didn't run on too much longer than I planned. So yeah, I will hand over to you, Matt, to take over the next steps.
Lleihau, that's great. Thank you for that very comprehensive overview. And I just wanted to just quickly plug the fact that through the Egin mentoring program that DTA Wales is running, groups and organisations can get access to energy audits via Severn Wye for free. And then we can help you with that in terms of what your next steps are. Through the Egin program, we help you put together an action plan and as to how you want to address energy efficiency issues in your building. And then we also, the lottery also provides an Egin grant up to £15,000 for available only to groups that have been through our Egin mentoring program. So that's also something to bear in mind, so that you could potentially use that money to spend on some of the measures that the audit recommends. So we now have about 20 minutes till we're due to finish, and I'm aware that some of you may have questions that arose, so there'll be time for that before we finish. But I just wanted to give people a chance to get to know each other a little bit here. There's quite a lot of us on the call, and I'm aware that most of us probably are connected with community building of some kind. So I would like it if we could just spend maybe 5 minutes, given time, in breakout rooms of about 5 people each, just to introduce yourself, say which organisation you're from, and to address the question, what would you say is the main challenge that you are facing as an organisation with regards to energy efficiency on your building? And maybe there might be a discussion that might arise from that within your breakout room. And yeah, we'll have a little bit of time to feedback from maybe not everyone, but afterwards. So if that's okay and clear to everyone, what is the main challenge that you're facing with regards to energy efficiency in your building? That could be, well, it could be anything really, from what Dave has been talking about. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to find some useful points of connections as people are facing similar challenges. Welcome back, close door. So hopefully that was a good chance to meet a few others and get a chance to chat to some others on this call. And yeah, just wanted to throw it out to, I'm not going to go around each breakout room, but does anyone have anything they'd like to share as a result of their chat in their breakout room with everybody? Maybe a challenge that they are facing, that perhaps somebody had some ideas about what to do, or yeah, something they'd like to pass on to everyone else.
This is our village hall. I don't know if you can see that. It's a shop, a village shop at Loreni. We're near Tenby, Milford Haven on the River Cleddau. The shop building was originally the farm office, so it's very ancient. It's as old as a farm, which goes back a long time. The building has an asbestos roof, and that's getting very fragile. The walls are stone. There's no sort of heating. We have chillers and fridges in the shop, which use huge amounts of electricity because they're old and leaking all over the place. So there's an awful lot we need to do to bring us, to an efficient state. So we need help to do that.
Have you had any help yet from Egin or anywhere else? Like, have you had an energy audit, for instance?
No, nothing at all. This is our initial inquiries. So nothing whatsoever at the moment.
Well, in the chat, I did put a link to our Egin website and the contact form there that you can click on to get in touch with us about potentially getting support through Egin, and through us you can get access to free energy audits from Severn Wye, our partners.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for, an energy audit.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Alison's got her hand raised.
Yeah, just a little bit of feedback really from the group we were in. Obviously, we've all got different buildings, as you mentioned before. Some are 60s, 70s prefab buildings. They're not really utilising all the floors of the building, a massive challenge. But within my own role, within Barvo, we support groups which vary from churches to sports clubs to community centres. And I think a lot of the issue is these are really ageing buildings. They're not in any good condition. They are huge. They take such a lot of heating, etc. By not heating it, damp is getting in, and it's just really trying to fund the existence of these buildings going forward. There's miners' institutes, 100 years plus, a lot of issues, but also even when the investments are done, it's sustaining that building, having enough usage of that building by the organisation. So I think there's a lot to consider. We are fortunate that we have Louisa Addiscott coming out to talk about the Egin Sustainable Steps funding at our next Community Networks event. But it's just, the problems are huge, I think.
Absolutely, yes, this is a massive problem, and we're probably only just scratching the surface. But hopefully what we're offering today as a chance to get to know each other a bit, and also to hear from Dave as a start in some of your journeys in terms of addressing them. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask to Dave, who, from his presentation, or to anyone that's spoken so far?
Yeah, I think a point that comes up, I think that Kath, I don't know if you want to come in, Kath, but talking about the massive challenge is just getting buildings. I think Alison touched on it, just getting buildings up to scratch. Your fabric of your building is such a massive challenge before you get onto the things that funders like to fund, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? It's in Valley's Kids, we've got 2 energy audits on one of our older buildings, which is a renovated church. So I feel your pain. It is, it is when you see that bucket with a hole in, it's exactly that all the time. But for us, it's about, how do we? It's just standing still at the moment, and then obviously having the funding then to retrofit. So we can, really see benefits from energy efficiency. And why do we do it? For all the reasons, we want to be part of the carbon journey, that's for sure. But also, I mean, for organisations, it is about the fact that, we cannot return to the fact that we can't afford to put the heating on, right? So it is about a real change of the fabric of this stuff. But for sure, I mean, and we identify huge costs as we move forward. So there's the will to do it, but yeah, just standing still sometimes is a challenge. Is that what you were on about, Simon? Sorry.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Does Egin advertise or give us any idea as regards suppliers, builders, etc., at all?
We don't offer that kind of service. I mean, there is in the energy reports that Severn Wye produce, I believe there's a link to the MCS registered installers. There's a website which so any installer that's registered with is it the micro generation scheme? Is that right, Dave? Maybe you can speak to this a bit better than I can.
Yeah, micro generation certification scheme.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously, it all depends where you are as to where those installers are. Because if you say near down in the southwest, was it?
Yeah.
There'll be a number of installers around there that would be able to help you with the work you need doing. But if you've got asbestos issues as well, that would be something that needs a quite specialist contractor. So yeah, it's not something we wouldn't recommend a certain supplier, because that's not within our remit. We would recommend a technology and then help you understand the best way of using that.
Yeah, can I ask a question? Because I suppose that's I'm not sure what the gap is. Because we've discussed, I suppose, in RCC with lots of partners, is that gap between having the audit and then getting the work in a quotable way that's sufficiently robust enough, some kind of small project management to get them to a place where a contractors can quote for the same thing. So do you do that bit of support as well, Dave?
Not as it stands. I mean, that's something we could discuss and look at in the future with DTA.
Yeah, in RCT we're looking at maybe if we can get some kind of community benefits from the contracting organisations, housing associations, council to do some of that work on our behalf, but it is a struggle.
Yeah, it's something that we've through other projects we've done that, and there's a benefit to doing that.
Yeah.
Because we're not all experts in tendering or deciphering what builders send back.
But it's right, you said you got a list of registered contractors on your site, though, is that correct?
So the MCS website has a list of installers of renewable energy that are registered with them, and they are quality assured.
Have we got that in the chat, the website?
I'll put that on in a minute for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's about generate. So those will be suppliers of renewable energy. Yeah. But they won't be suppliers of insulation or other kind of fabric that needs to be done. So that would need to be finding those sorts of suppliers is I guess it's up to the organisation to find local suppliers that can provide that. So as far as I know, there's no single website that provides kind of a full list of all of the suppliers of insulation, for instance.
Yeah, we're just worth emphasising how important that is, because I think we've all had experience, either personally or professionally, about somebody doing bad work that's been funded, and then you're really stuck then because it's already been funded and you still got the same problem.
Can be an issue, can't it?
Yeah, definitely taking recommendations of people who have had work done locally to understand where there are good and bad installers.
We've reached 1 o'clock, so I think it's probably time to call an end to today's session. If you have any other further questions that you've not had a chance to ask, please don't hesitate to send them in to me. I'll put my email address in the chat, or to Holly. Just for me to thank Dave for great presentation today, and for everyone who spent the time with us. Hopefully it was useful, and please do join us on the Egin online community if you're not there already, or you can click on the link I've put and add yourself, or you can say in the chat now, please add me, and we'll do it for you. And it's a place where you can carry on the conversations that we've been starting today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.